Joining me now is human rights activist Martin Luther King III of the Drum Major Institute, civil rights attorney Ben Crump, and Judith Brown Dianis, executive director of the Advancement Project. Martin, Ben, Judith, thank you all for joining us tonight. I want to start by playing some sound from President Trump's inauguration last month, which fell on the federal holiday honoring your father, Martin. Let's take a listen.
Today is Martin Luther King Day, and his honor, this will be a great honor, but in his honor we will strive together to make his dream a reality. We will make his dream come true. I will also end the government policy of trying to socially engineer race and gender into every aspect of public and private life. We will forge a society that is colorblind and merit-based.
Now, Martin, less than 2 weeks after the president laid claim to your father's dream, the Pentagon's intelligence agency announced it will pause observance of King Day, Black History Month, or Juneteenth due to Trump's colorblind, merit-based ban on DEI, which he's blamed on just about all of the nation's problems, now including the deadly plane crash over Washington this week. What's it like for you to watch the president invoke your father's name? You picked up that mantle. Even as he attacks the inclusion he fought and died for. Your father fought for us to be able to compete without merit. Not that he didn't want merit on the table. How do you feel as you hear this?
Well, certainly not surprised, awfully disappointed. But the real question is, what do we do about it? And I'm glad that Attorney Crump is here, because part of the remedy is going to be tremendous legal pushback against everything, because he's doing everything by executive order. So Congress doesn't even exist per se. And I think there are a lot of things that are not quite legal. It's going to take a minute to navigate through. But I think the other thing is, as you and others have said, Rev, we've got to engage in some kind of disinvestment campaign that is constructive and that can be effective. Because when a system is not supportive of you, then you don't need to support the system. We've seen this film before. My father and others were involved in economic removal back in the early 60s. Students were engaged in economic removal during the South African apartheid movement, and we got to do something. The fact of the matter is, somehow we got to really come together and really collectively move. And I think we have to join our Black and brown community as well.
I agree, and we've already started that. We've started something I call a boycott, where we are supporting those businesses that have said they will not drop DEI, but I'll get to that later. Judith, in these first 2 weeks, we've seen President Trump go after one vulnerable group after another, while at the same time hijacking the works of the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division. And with that, the division has pulled back from lawsuits and enforcements involving LGBTQ protections, transgender rights, voting rights, abortion rights. It goes on. Instead, he's directing the Justice Department to go after DEI in private sector with the threat of a lawsuit from the Civil Rights Division. What's your reaction to this assault?
Yes, Rev, we have seen the rollbacks pretty quickly. In fact, our Advancement Project is counsel in a voting rights case in Virginia. And this week at a hearing, the Department of Justice said they're withdrawing from the case. We have seen that in several other cases. And they're doing either withdrawals, they're doing dismissals, or they will change sides. And what we have to understand is, like, the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division has played an incredibly important role enforcing civil rights all the way back to the 1950s, 1960s. They really did hold the line for us when states' rights were moving to oppress and repress us. And so it's an important division. And what it means right now is that organizations like mine, Ben Crump, and others will have to do more litigation to protect our civil rights. And we're going to have to rely on those Biden appointees, 240 new judges, and we're going to have to go to the state courts in order to protect people from the feds.
Now, staying with that, Ben Crump, Attorney General of Black America, with this freeze on civil rights, the Civil Rights Division, several police reform agreements, consent decrees that were finalized in former President Biden's final months are in limbo. And among the cities impacted is Louisville, Kentucky, 4 years after Breonna Taylor's fatal police shooting, and Minneapolis, 4 years after George Floyd's murder. In that time, you represented the families of both the deceased. We've been involved from National Action Network with you. We've watched these consent decrees get negotiated and now sabotaged by Trump's Justice Department. Describe the impact on police reform and the police reform movement in the country, Attorney Crump.
Well, Reverend Al, it's been devastating to say in just a word. I agree with my learned colleagues, Martin III and Judith, that we have to confront these unconstitutional acts. I mean, he's acting without any response from Congress to get authority to roll back all the civil rights that we've gained. So we have to be strategic and confront them in the court of law and in the court of public opinion like you're doing with Costco. But the other thing we have to do is learn from the lessons of Martin Luther King Jr. when he said in the letter from the Birmingham jail, just because they say it's legal, that doesn't make it right. And as Judith does with the Advancement Project, we got to learn from Frederick Douglass. Without struggle, there can be no progress. And we're going to have to struggle in these next 4 years, but we can't get this press for the struggle, Reverend Al, as you have taught me. We have to celebrate the struggle every day because that's how we make progress for our children.
Now, Martin, your home city of Atlanta is one of several that have seen immigration and custom reinforcement raids, really, under the president's mass deportation action. ICE says it has arrested 7,400 people in 9 days since the crackdown began, with few specifics as to who has been targeted and their origins. But I want to remind our viewers that black migrants are also caught in the crosshairs of this purge, with thousands of Haitian nationals fearful that Trump will end their temporary protected status after he demonized them during the campaign. And Haitian leaders are saying that Trump's policies toward the country will devastate it. I've said this before on our air. I don't think the president would be pursuing this purge so energetically if the migrants he was removing were coming from predominantly white countries like Greenland and Canada, who he's trying to bring in the country. What do you think, Martin?
No, I certainly agree wholeheartedly, Rev. I also think it's unfortunate that we're at this particular point because many of the industries, and what is perplexing to me is not that our immigration system is broken, but that we are saying that the problem is these people are taking our jobs. These jobs that many immigrants have, whether it's picking our food, whether it's construction, whether it's lawn care, and it goes on and on. If you remove all these people, at some point, your economy is going to collapse. And they are teetering on the brink. They don't seem to realize or care about that. But it's going to at some point affect and create a major problem. Beyond the fact, the first thing is morally wrong to divide families. All of us should be concerned about the fact that you're taking children, you're targeting, you're going into churches, you're going into, all kind of places. It's unconscionable what is happening. And so at some point, there's going to be some additional pushback, not just from immigrants trying to protect themselves. We need to lift up and protect everybody. And we need to create a system that is fair so that people can come in the country in the right way. But I think it's just going to be a disaster.
Judith, employees at several federal agencies were instructed to remove pronouns and, in some cases, nicknames from their email signatures yesterday as part of Trump's executive order that gender identity be removed from government materials, and, of course, his broader attacks on transgender rights these last 2 weeks. Less than 2% of Americans identify as transgender, and transgender service members are a fraction of the military force. Given that, as I just asked Martin, why has Trump taken aim at this community specifically? What does he gain by targeting them the way he has?
Well, you know, this is one of those issues that I think he thinks tested well for him during the election cycle, and he's going to deliver on it. And what is horrible about this is that this isn't just like the erasure of transgender people, but this is opening the doors to more violence against that community, more harm against that community, because if the president is doing it and state governors are doing it, then why can't the people who are on the street start to attack them? And so I'm really worried about the way in which not only is he, first of all, using the pen to make laws that don't exist, right? Like, executive orders are not laws. You cannot change the Constitution through an executive order. But what he is doing is what is a democracy stress test. He's trying to see how far he can go, how much harm he can do, so that he can keep his base, the MAGA base, together.
And how far we will let it go, other Americans that still believe in democratic principles. Ben, you're currently working with several residents recovering from last month's wildfire that devastated Los Angeles' Altadena area, which is known for its large historically black community. And new research from the University of California, Los Angeles, has found that the Altadena black homeowners were more likely than others to have had their homes savagely damaged, if not destroyed, by that fire. And they'll have a harder time rebuilding financially. Now, I want to mention that I'll be in Altadena Thursday in my capacity as president of National Action Network to hold services with some of the victims in Altadena and with you. And despite the suffering, the president is pushing for conditions on federal aid to California and toying with the shuttering of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, which is on the ground in Altadena and the rest of the area impacted. What would that mean for the people recovering there?
It's inhumane that he would make it political when so many people are suffering. I mean, they lost everything. Not only did they lose their property, some of them lost their lives, but many of them lost what they see as their future, Reverend Al, to give generational wealth to their children. Because oftentimes these black people who made up this beautiful multicultural community known as Altadena, they talk about Palisades, they talk about Hollywood Hills, but we got to keep talking about Altadena because those black people's lives matter so much just as well. And the fact that they're not talking about them, it's almost as if they're trying to sweep them under the rug. And we got to say, no, we're going to repair this beautiful multicultural community. We're going to rebuild this beautiful multicultural community, and we're going to make sure their legacy is never forgotten. And that's why, Reverend Al, if the president won't come to Altadena, Martin III, Judith, our community have to come and save us. We have to file the insurance claims. We have to hold those accountable. And so, Rev, again, we have to be unapologetic defenders of our lives, our humanity, and our culture.
Well, I'll be there Thursday with you. The family invited us, and I'll be there, and I'm sure many of others will start doing that. I want to look forward now, because those of us in the struggle are fighting back in our own respective ways, whether it is in the courts or on the street. As head of National Action Network, I've celebrated the courage of companies like Costco, which has continued its corporate diversity efforts, even as Trump has intimidated other businesses into abandoning their efforts. I've also spoken out against those who want to dismantle diversity programs, including the hedge fund billionaire Bill Ackman. And we held a rally in Washington, D.C. on Inauguration Day, which was King Day, to let the president know we're ready to keep the dream alive. Today, we took hundreds on our second week for a boycott out in New Jersey. We started in Harlem with about 150 last week. We had over 300 with Mayor Ras Barack and Reverend Steffi Bartley and I taking them shopping at Costco's to celebrate those that celebrate and respect us. So I have to ask you all, very briefly, please, we're out of time, but I wanted to keep this segment going. 30 seconds each. Where do you go from here in terms of civil rights, voting rights, police reform? Starting again with you, Martin. You and I represent a movement-based kind of nonviolence and peaceful direct action. How do you send a message through activism that gets this attention?
Well, the first thing is all of what you're doing today, Rev, and all of us need to join in. We got to stay engaged. We can't give up. We can't give out. We can't give in. We have to keep pushing, and ultimately we will arise.
Attorney Crump, many of us are looking to the court system to hold up, if not nullify, Trump's actions over the next 4 years. Your thoughts on what's next?
We have to be courageous, Reverend Al Sharpton. We have to continue to make them say the words diversity, equity, and inclusion, not just say DEI, because the virtues are in the words diversity, equity, and inclusion. Every humane society respects those things. And finally, I'll just say this, Reverend Al, we have to make sure they read the Constitution. They apparently have forgotten that the Constitution is what governs America.
Judith, you close out with this summit. How is the Advancement Project responding to this moment?
Well, we are going to be in the courts. We are going to be supporting people who are getting in the streets, because we know we have to be in the streets so that people understand we are not going to sit on the sidelines in this moment. And we have to remind our elected officials, whether they're Dems or Republicans, that they must hold the line on our democracy and not let this turn into an authoritarian government.
Many thanks to Martin Luther King III, Benjamin Crump, and Judith Brown Dianis for being with our first summit on the first day of Black History Month 2025.